So for very particular cases which are very stubborn, there's actually one remedy which for me is an emergency remedy.
What is it?
It's working with one of the deities, Mahakala.
Mahakala.
He's considered to be the male consort of Kali.
Oh, no way.
Mahakala, just so that you know, it means the great time. He's perhaps the most ferocious of forms among the deities that you're going to ever witness. Time and space are ultimately destroyed until there's just a vacuum and a void. So even the annihilation of the universe as we know it is resolved by Mahakala. And he is himself the void that remains after the dissolution of time and space. So if you're using a form like Mahakala, you are taking your realization of impermanence to an extreme, to such a great extreme, that it often, the way that the disciple reacts to an energy like Mahakala could be very difficult to digest. He's a terrifying form. He will shock you into realization in a way that's completely merciless. That's one of the reasons why he has a very wrathful form. So that's like an emergency situation that I will set aside just for those particular students who are very, I wouldn't call them hopeless cases, but they've tried many methods and this way or that, they still cannot overcome their fears and their obstacles.
Okay, good. I'm ready for
Mahakala. Destruction. Think of it as the master of destruction and the master of the so-called greater time, which waits for nobody, which waits for nothing. Whether you're a good man or whether you're a bad man, Mahakala just tramples over you. He's not a very sweet form. Although, if you look at the tradition, one of his expressions is actually Avalokiteshvara, the Buddha of compassion.
How?
Because the device as a metaphor was, I'm not saying there's no objective reality to Mahakala, but the device as a metaphor was created for compassionate purposes, to help you awaken such an intensity of intelligence and force in you that you have such a fierce determination to overcome obstacles without any hesitation.
Why?
Because there's a category of deities among the Buddhists which are called Dharmapalas, which are a collection of wrathful deities.
Okay.
They usually have black, red, or blue colored skin.
Okay.
But all of them without exception have a very wrathful expression. For the same reasons that in one form or another they represent forces of destruction.
Okay.
And that's the main reason why they're depicted in these with such ferocity. Think of them as forceful obstacle removers. Why such mercilessness? Because the message is that this is a destructive force which is beyond rules and regulations. To the extent, of course, beyond rules and regulations, to the extent where even time and space themselves are annihilated into the void. It's one of the expressions of Mahakala. My experience is, and this may sound absurd to you, but I experienced Mahakala before I even had the concept of what's Mahakala.
How or why?
A tremendous fear of death.
Oh.
And I told you that the way that I explored into the reality of death was not controlled in the least. I'll just sit and just out of pure curiosity, I would say, let me see what happens if I let my mind wander in areas which I previously would dare I would not dare to let it wander. So then I started contemplating upon death, but in a way which was very sober, without lying to myself, without deceiving myself that this is something that I can escape or which is avoidable, and realizing that among the many certainties or uncertainties of life, what I know for sure is, as a result of birth in the body, one day the body must decompose and wither away. I must experience this sooner or later, unless maybe I have an accidental death in the body or something like that, and that's really just putting myself in the hands of chance. As a yogi, you don't want to put yourself in the hands of chance. Otherwise, well-being is accidental. No more accidental well-being when you start to travel the path of a yogi.
Yeah.
So then I said, okay, let me really look at it with fresh eyes, not burdened by the eyes of the past. It was so sincere, the curiosity, that it had a fresh innocence to it. And then when I looked at the subject through that lens, the reaction that it awakened in me was explosive. I think I've described it to you before, yes? It was like an avalanche of centuries and centuries of the fear of death, not my fear of death, the fear of death of the entire humanity.
More than centuries.
Yes.
But for animals too, no?
Exactly.
Since the beginning.
Thank you. Not just human beings, of all of life. Because the will to live is so fundamental to life. And fear is what it's a kind of a mechanism from nature to guarantee that the wheel is going to continue rolling. So it was that mountainous avalanche kind of a reaction, and it just was so overwhelming. I couldn't physically handle it. I just fell asleep, and then I woke up in the middle of the night, just suddenly, and I wasn't feeling normal. The feeling was exactly, I didn't take any substances, no drugs, like I smoked a blunt. I was stoned. I looked in the eye, same symptoms, the eyes were bloodshot red. My intellect was fairly okay, but a little bit disoriented. But I felt like I was losing my sensation of the body. It was like a feather, it was very subtle. So I had to continue walking in circles for about a half hour just to help my consciousness become more anchored to the physical body. And it wasn't like a calm circumambulation. It was a very terrifying circling. I really didn't know, am I going to survive through the rest of this night? This could be it for me. I don't know what's happening to my system. This is a very intense reaction. Maybe I contracted a disease from earlier during the day, or maybe now I'm just experiencing the symptoms of it. I didn't know. But I felt something's not right here. And it was like a wave. It had a life cycle. Once the wave calmed down a little bit, then it's as if one half of the fear of death just suddenly faded away. And it never came back. And then again, I had other mini episodes of this eruption, and it would come suddenly. It's like the memory of that experience didn't complete its work. It said, no, I'm still here. I'm not finished with you yet. And then, let's say, I think it was maybe like 3 days later, another eruption. And I would have like this flash of many subconscious thoughts, all related to impermanence and death. Like I would imagine spontaneously the impermanence of the galaxies, the stars, the moon. The sun was a big point for me, because when the sun withers away in 8 billion years, life here as we know it is finished. Just all of these random contemplations, I wasn't thinking, they came to me. And then another part of the fear of death fell away. And then, by and by, it became weaker and weaker, and since that time, I'm completely free of it. For me, that was an experience of Mahakala. Just sheer intensity, without rules attached, no regulations, a very chaotic kind of wake-up call.